Ladies and gentlemen, we are very pleased at the Montana Libertarian Party meetup to welcome Spike Cohen, the founder of We Are the People. Wrong one. We Are the Power. Take it away, Spike. Tell us all about We Are the Power. You are the power.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you were the power. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. And what I'll do, because I think I was told this is going to be somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour. I'll give a little breakdown about what's that?
No time limit at all. You can go as long as you want.
Oh, okay. Okay. I will have to leave after an hour. So but I what I can do is I can give a little spiel about you or the power, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have about it.
You want to get
So
us sodas or water or anything?
No, I'm fine, but thank you. So I'll go ahead and start with what You Were the Power is all about. And I think I'll start with why we started in the first place. Um, Even prior to the campaign in 2020, I realized that there were, and many of us have come to this realization as well, that there were a few things that were happening in the liberty movement that were holding us back from what we believe, which is clearly that, we do best when we are most free. We believe in ideas like non-aggression, property rights. We live free markets and all of that stuff. And the problem is we often aren't connecting people with that in a way that they connect with things. We're presenting it in a way that we connect with things. Well, it's not for nothing that libertarians tend to be a little bit more cerebral than the rest of the public, because we tend to be attracted to ideas and arguments. And I don't mean arguments as in yelling at each other, although we do that too, but we are attracted to the argument behind an idea. We can be persuaded a lot more easily than someone else by simply someone presenting us with information that we can verify as true, and it will change our mindset about things. And most people aren't wired that way. And so the consequence of that is multifold. One of them is that we aren't getting as far ahead as we would like, not just in the realm of electoral politics, but even just in the realm of cultural politics, how people think about things and approach things. It also means that we are increasingly less free. And even as people are more and more frustrated at the status quo, they often blame it on either us being too free or the wrong people being in charge, or something like that. They don't tie the correlating loss of freedom with the corresponding loss of everything else in their lives, a reduction in their prosperity, a reduction in the harmony in their communities, and a reduction in their overall happiness. They aren't making that connection. And so as a result of that, we often get very frustrated. And so, anyone who's been here a long time in the LP or in the liberty movement in general, you see the burnout. You see people come, they're excited, they're ready to fight for liberty. They do it for a few election cycles, and then they say, you know what? My mind hasn't changed about what needs to be done. I just don't have any fight left in me. And so because very often they weren't given attainable wins, if you will, they feel like they're doing it for naught, and that it's fruitless. And so we have a lot of people that often leave the movement. They also, if they stick around in the movement, we often, because we can't control the status quo that's happening around us, we can't control who's in this movement, or at least we can have influence on it. And so we often start fighting each other. We perceive one side or the other, or one individual or another, as being responsible for us not doing better. And so we kind of, our idle hands end up resulting in us using them against each other. And so there's a lot of infighting as well. And I'm probably not telling anyone anything that you don't already know, but these were things I was identifying even before the campaign. And then as a result of that, people are suffering right now. I mean, we're all to some extent being at least inconvenienced and suffering in some way by the abuses and excesses of government. But there are some people who, they're about to lose everything. They're in the process of having everything taken from them: their lives, their livelihoods, their families, their businesses, their homes, all sorts of things. And there isn't, very often the liberty movement isn't in a position to be able to help them. And so during the campaign, I'm going around the country. I visited, in fact, Montana is one of the few states I didn't visit. I still need to get out there. Hint, hint. But Anyway, during the campaign, I visited close to 40 states, did hundreds of events. And at many of those events, I'd have people show up and ask me and the other people there that were organizing it for help. And it would be about some local thing. It would be that their home was being taken by a corrupt city council that was abusing eminent domain or abusing their interpretation of the zoning code. A lot of people that were fighting back against the absolutely ridiculous COVID restrictions that were destroying their churches, their businesses, their homes, their families, and many other cases like that. And when I'd hear about it, I'd say, well, that's terrible. But unfortunately, I'm running a federal campaign. You're talking about a local or state issue. But here's what I can do. I can try to connect you with some libertarians in this area and see if they have any way that they can help you. And if we can get something together, I'll be sure to put it on my social media and get it out to the public. And maybe we can get the public behind it as well. And after the campaign, I started doing kind of an audit of my social media through the year. And I noticed that some of the posts that got the most engagement had nothing to do with my campaign. They had nothing to do with, Joe Jorgensen or me or Trump or Biden or the issues we were running on. They were about those families that I found out about, or those small businesses, or those individuals who needed help. And I thought, well, there are people that need our help. We have a liberty community that's looking for wins, because in some of those cases, we actually won. We were able to actually get the government to back off. And it was almost like in my mind at that time, I was handing it to these activists locally, but it was almost kind of a passing thought for me, because I was busy, running for vice president. So I would put it on my social media and hope for the best. And we were winning on quite a few of those causes. I thought, okay, so now we're giving libertarians something useful to do, and something that will give them the smaller wins they need to hold them hold them while they are staying in the LP and fighting for the bigger wins. And I saw that the public, when I looked at who was sharing this stuff and who was engaging with it, it wasn't the usual suspects that I would typically see, in my shares and my comment sections. It was people I'd never seen before. In fact, sometimes it was influencers and people that had nothing to do with politics, and certainly not libertarian politics, and they were sharing it. And I thought, okay, so we're getting the public bought in here, and we're helping people now, and we're spreading the liberty message. We're not compromising on it. We're bringing in the public without trying to pander or water down or trying to find some magic way to sell our argument to them. We're just showing them examples of government abuse and giving them a often rudimentary call to action. Maybe there's something here. And so starting in 2021, before I was going to go and set up a nonprofit structure and ask for donations and ask for thousands of people to become volunteers and everything, I wanted to make sure there was something to this, that this wasn't just, a handful of fluke examples, that we could actually make something of this. And so in 2021, we picked a couple of test causes, a couple of causes that we found out about, and we got a few dozen activists across the country involved and made them the point people to deal with those causes in those particular areas. And, we reached out to our media contacts that we had made during the campaign to see if they wanted to cover any of these things. And again, before we started trying to invest serious amounts of money in this, we wanted to see if it worked. Well, in 2021, we had a roughly 70% success rate on a couple dozen causes. And those activists that helped us with that work said it was some of the most fulfilling work they'd ever done. And some of them had been involved in the liberty movement and the LP for decades. Some of them were some of the original founding members of their state affiliates. And they said this was one of the most useful things they'd ever done. And it gave them more energy to continue doing work in areas that don't have as many immediate wins and gains. And obviously we were helping people as well. And in doing so, we reached roughly 50 million people just on our social media. That didn't include the media coverage that we got in national media and statewide media. That was just our social media. Based on that, I figured we got something here. So in 2022, we officially launched the nonprofit. We started accepting donations. We started reaching out and having members. And we are now 2 years in. We have worked on well over 100 causes. Our success rate is now closer to 90%. Last year, we had a reach of over 100 million. We are on pace to have a reach this year somewhere between 150 and 200 million. We have over 3,000 members across the country and many more joining us every day. And we are doing it by focusing on a very core message. Each of these individual causes has the same thing in common. The government is not respecting these people as individual human beings. They're treating them as an opportunity to make money. They're treating them as a political obstacle or a political pawn, something that they can use to their political advantage, or they're just seeing them as a nuisance, something that they want out of their way. But whatever it is, it's the same thing. They're not seeing them as individual human beings. And we intuitively respect one another as individual human beings, and we expect other human beings to respect us in the same way. And when I say respect, I don't mean that we expect them to respect our opinions or respect who we are or what we're about or even know or care about us, but we expect them to respect the fact that we are individual human beings. It's the same reason why we don't cook and eat each other or stomp on each other like insects, right? It's that we recognize there's something different about us. We are human beings and should be treated that way. And just a basic level of intrinsic respect for that. You think about any time that you are out in the public or you travel anywhere or you're really in close proximity to anyone, in a given day, you might be in relatively close proximity with hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people. When I go and travel somewhere and I'm going through multiple airports, I might have come within relatively close contact of 100,000 people in the same day. And yet at no point did I have any really reasonable expectation that I was in danger, even though I knew nothing about the vast, vast majority of those people that I interacted with. And it's because I have a reasonable expectation that they're going to treat me like an individual human being. They have that same expectation. It is that expectation of human respect that allows us to maximize the amount of prosperity we have, the amount of harmony that we have as a people, and consequently the amount of happiness that we have. It's what allows us to thrive is that knowledge that that's not going to happen. And if you look at the areas where there's less prosperity, less harmony, less happiness, more violence, more crime, you see the opposite. You see less respect for people as individual human beings. And so we intrinsically understand this. This is something that if you said to an 8-year-old, hey, when we respect each other as people, we can live better, right? And they'd say, yeah, of course. I mean, it's not something you have to spend much time convincing people of. And yet the vast majority of people set that expectation aside when it comes to the government. Even though the government is literally just a bunch of people that if they weren't, anytime that they aren't operating as the government, we'd never tolerate that. We would never tolerate them doing to even a single person what they do to all of us en masse when they're standing on this side of the podium and they're wearing their fancy suit and they have their name plate there and they're operating as an official with the government. And so what we're doing with all of these causes is we're stripping away the pomp and circumstance and the titles and all of that stuff. I very often refer to these people on a first name basis to just remind people, these are human beings we're talking about who are looking at other human beings, and instead of treating them with the respect for them as individual human beings, they're instead writing roughshod over them because they can, and that we shouldn't tolerate that. And I give them an immediate call to action on that cause, but I also am, in doing so, I'm showing them over and over again that this all ties to a lack of respecting people as individuals. It's the core of the libertarian message. Long before we're going to convince people of ideas like the non-aggression principle or private property rights or free markets or non-aggression or any of these things, we have to tie it to something that they have no argument with whatsoever. They can't say, yeah, but, because at its core, they agree with it. And then they have to have that argument with themselves, not with us, if something that they believe in doesn't align with something that they already believe in. They have to have that cognitive dissonance with themselves. And another part of what we're doing is when we bring these causes out and we give people this call to action, we have thousands of people from across the country, sometimes around the planet, jumping on these causes and helping us, for lack of a better word, cyberbully these government officials into doing the right thing. I'm not waiting for them to become a libertarian. I'm not waiting for them to say they agree with us. I'm just giving them an opportunity to become an active member of the liberty movement, an active activist, a useful and effective activist in the liberty movement. And the longer they're there, the more they're going to understand our ideas, because we're not arguing with them. We're not telling them to go read this book or telling them why they're wrong about this or any of that. We're just showing them things that they agree with us on, things that they know are wrong, and that give them a call to action to be able to help us right that wrong. And we do it over and over and over again. And each time we do it, we are driving home the same message over and over again. This stops happening when we demand that people who put themselves in positions of power over us and authority over us are expected to respect us the exact same way that we expect everyone else to respect us as individual human beings. And that's the core of what we do. I can give some, I guess, before I'll open to any questions you guys have, I'll give a couple of examples, some of our most recent examples of that. Probably the one that, if you've been following me on social media, you've seen a lot about are some of the families that we've uncovered over the past few months who are basically having their children stolen from them. They have children with chronic health conditions that cause them to get bruising and swelling and fractures in their bones, things like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, neonatal rickets, osteogenesis imperfecta, and a bunch of other connective tissue diseases and autoimmune diseases and all sorts of pretty scary stuff to deal with on its own. Imagine being a parent. Some of you may be a parent of a child with a condition like that. And then imagine taking that child to a hospital and then finding out that you've been labeled as a suspect of abusing your child. And then the police come and arrest you, and CPS, or whatever you call it in your state, Children's Protective Service workers, come and take your children from you. And then the prosecutor or the judge tells you that the condition of your bond to be able to go home is that you're not allowed to speak with your spouse or live with your spouse indefinitely until the criminal charges are fully adjudicated. The criminal charges never come because there's a lot more due process involved in a criminal case than there is in a family court case. And they have no evidence that you abuse your kids. And after you fight for months and spend sometimes thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to finally get your kids' medical records because you know something is wrong, you know you didn't abuse your kids, then you find out that they were hiding the fact that they know that your kid had a chronic health condition that proves that this injury or breaking or fractures or bruising or swelling or whatever you brought the child in for is a result of a chronic health condition, and that they had no evidence that you or anyone else was abusing the kids. And then you find out that the kids often still not being treated because that would mean acknowledging they had a chronic health condition. And then you find out that the judge is ordering non-reunification, which means you may never see your kids again. And you are all along being told, listen, if you just sign this thing admitting guilt, then we'll let you live with your spouse again. And yeah, you're not getting your kids back, but you know, you might be able to get some monitored remote visitations on holidays by Zoom. You might still be able to actually have some interaction with your kids. And this will be behind you. And you're young, you could maybe have some more kids in the future. We've had people that were told that by their officials in their state. If this sounds like a nightmare, it is. And we're finding out that it's happening to thousands of innocent families in just about every state in the union all across the country. And it's happening for a very simple reason. The federal government, through Title IV of the Social Security Act, gives money to Child Protective Services every time they call a case abuse, not just to that agency, but to the individual workers, to the child abuse pediatrician, to, in some states, to the responding officer, to the caseworker, and to the caseworker supervisor, to the family court that's involved, and the judge and that judge's department, to the foster families that are involved, to the adoptive families that are involved if the child is placed for permanent adoption, to the visitation centers that are involved, to all the other vendors in this cottage industry, the I guess we'll call it the child trafficking industrial complex that's been built around all of this. They all get a lot of money every time it's called abuse. And if it turns out it's not abuse, they don't have to give the money back. And if it turns out, and if it isn't, if they say it's not abuse, they don't get any money. So basically, oddly enough, the number of reported child abuse cases that continues to skyrocket and go through the roof, and an increasing number of parents are being left destitute, having spent every penny they have and not able to get their kids back. They've been getting away with this for many, many years now, and it's getting worse every year. And they thought they were going to continue to get away with it. But then we found out about it, and we've already started to see changes. We've worked with families whose once we got the public on their officials that were involved in their case, they did a complete 180, let the kids go back with the family, in some cases drop the charges, drop the bond conditions to allow the spouses to be able to live together again, and basically backtrack on everything, because now it's not politically expedient to continue destroying this family and trafficking their children. We're working with legislators and attorneys and activists across the country who've been in this space for a very long time to create model legislation that will be able to fix this problem at the state level by reintroducing due process to child abuse cases in family court, and to change the funding structure so as to remove the perverse incentive that they currently have to just call every case abuse. This is just one of the many things that we are working on. We're working on causes of that involve eminent domain abuse. We're working on causes that involve retribution, where local government officials are going after members of the public that they just don't personally like, going after their businesses and their livelihoods. We've gone after cases of local governments ordering people not to feed people in need, sometimes illegally, where they don't even have an order that they can point to that says why they're not allowed to do that. We've had cases of people that have gotten in trouble for offering to help someone that was on the streets, which, again, perfectly legal to do that. We've had cases where we have gotten law enforcement departments to release body cam footage to prove that they had wrongfully arrested and abused people. We do cases like this across the country, and they all share the exact same thing. We find people who are being abused and disrespected by their local governments. We organize our thousands of activists across the country and the public at large to fight for them to get the respect and the justice that they should have gotten from day one, and we don't stop until we win, and we win a lot. I'd love to have you join us. If you haven't already, go to youarethepower.net. We'd love to have you become a part of it today. Yeah, with that, I'm happy to open it up to any questions that you have. And thank you again for having me here.
We are very happy to have you. I watched quite a few of your of your series. Going back to the child trafficking problem, I remember noticing that there was one particular nurse who had been convicted, or she was thrown out of one state and she went to another state. And
yes, what is her name? Barbara Knox, I believe. She was the head of, I work on so many of these causes, I just want to make sure I'm getting it right. She was the head of child abuse pediatrics, which, by the way, is a bogus thing. It's not real. It's basically, it's doctors who take a few hours of a course on what might be child abuse, how to spot the signs of child abuse. There's no exact science to it. They use that term. It basically means a doctor that didn't get scooped up by a private practice after residency, and they find out they can make a bunch of money by hanging out at the hospital and pretending every kid they look at is being abused. That's really what child abuse pediatrics is. I'm sure there are a bunch of really great child abuse pediatricians, but we're finding too many that just are absolute nightmares. But anyway, this particular nightmare, she was the head of that child abuse pediatrics department I know one was in Alaska, and then another one was in either Minnesota or Wisconsin, I believe. But she was in two states, Alaska and another state. In both states, after a thorough investigation, they determined that she had been wrongfully accusing parents of abuse, doctoring the evidence and medical records, hiding medical records from both her supervisors and the parents and the caseworkers if it didn't help her say that it was abuse, and then also trying to manipulate and coerce the people working under her to back up her claims of abuse. And it caused many people to quit because they didn't want to work under her, because they didn't want to call cases abuse. and she was let go from both of those. Unfortunately, she's now under the employ of a hospital in Jacksonville whose name escapes me at the moment. She is now in charge of their child abuse pediatrics department, and a lot of families in Georgia, when their children have certain exigent health problems, they take them to that hospital right there on the Florida Georgia line. And so we found out about this through many of the families that have suffered under her. Well, first of all, why she's not in prison, I'm not sure, but why she's being hired to do anything for anyone, I have no idea. And why she's still doing this when there is years of evidence of her falsifying these cases. But the problem is, she's not really an outlier. I mean, she's one we found out about. We've certainly put a lot of heat on her, or encouraged the public to let her know how they feel. But there's another doctor named Stephen Messner who operates out of Children's Hospital of Atlanta. They call it CHOA. He's just as bad. There's many of them. Again, the root of all of this, in this case, is that the federal government pays them extra to call it abuse. So if there's anything in the kid's case that looks like it could be construed to be called abuse, they call it abuse. And if it turns out not to be abuse, they don't have to refund the money. So yeah, just call it abuse. And if the parents fight it and they win, and okay, great, we still got the money. And the further they can go along, the worse it gets, because they'll go, okay, this child's being abused. This child's now in foster care. This child's now being put up for adoption. In every one of those cases, they get more and more money. And by the time the kid's adopted, if they go, oh no, this child has a chronic health condition, if they then acknowledge it after they destroyed this family, then they get even more federal money. So it just gets worse and worse and worse the longer it goes on. And it is, I call it child trafficking. It is the illegal taking of children from innocent families for monetary gain. And there's even a whole, smuggling network involved. And they're operating under the color of law, but it's completely illegal what they're doing. The problem is that they're the ones in charge of making sure what they're doing is legal, and they're not. So yeah, no, Barbara Knox is terrible, but unfortunately, she's one of many, many, many.
Weren't you also running into trouble with Governor Kemp over some of this?
Well, we're trying to get Governor Kemp on board with meeting with us, and we've had some of his people reach out to us to talk with us, and we keep saying, listen, you can talk to us all you want. He needs to meet with these families. These are families in his state. We've uncovered a lot of cases in Georgia, but what we're seeing is they're everywhere. I mean, we're talking to people that are in New Hampshire, people that are in Texas, people that are in other states. I don't know a cause or a family that we're working with in Montana, but I guarantee it's happening there too, because it's at its root, it's a federal funding problem. And I don't know of a single state that has actually re-implemented real due process into adjudicating child abuse accusations in family court. This is something that started, from what we can tell, sometime in the 1970s, where they claimed that because child abuse was a terrible problem, that they needed to make it easier to go after parents and take their kids. And lo and behold, by removing due process, that makes it a heck of a lot easier. It also creates a massive incentive to just call every case abuse, because you get more state funding, the more cases of abuse you can claim are happening. Then the federal government got involved shortly after that and started throwing money at the states to do this. So anyway, it is a huge problem. We are in the process of uncovering it. And one of our many goals that we're working on is to fix it at the state level by nullifying bad federal funding and reintroducing due process where it always should have been.
Hey, Spike. So this is John Vanek. I have seen a lot of this just because my parents were foster parents, and my mom has seen the most of it. She worked for Wendy's Wonderful Kids, trying to place teenagers who are about to age out of the system. And she oftentimes found that she couldn't do her job because the system prevented her from placing these kids. and most of it being management just wouldn't allow her to do the things that she needed to do to place these kids or to get them adopted, and just keeping them in the system, or placing them in worse families that are not good for them, and just keeping the system rolling, so they're just bouncing from home to home to home.
I'm not sure what that is, but that looks like some kind of spam thing. Sorry, John, go ahead.
No, it's all right. That's all I kind of had to say. But I mean, if if you wanted to, if you know somebody that my mom could speak to about that, um, if she can help in any way, I'm sure she would love to.
Absolutely. If she wants to go to youarethepower.net, or if you want to go on her behalf, she can either sign up to become a member, and then when we reach out to her, she can find out, talk more about how we can work together. Or we have a contact form on the website she can fill out. We'd be happy to work with her in any potential way that we can. And I wish I could say that your mom's experience is a uncommon one, but we've heard that story so many times. I don't know if you saw, I was nodding my head as you were telling it. The number of children who, as they put it, graduate out of the system, where they go through some of them, their adolescence, or even their young childhood, all the way through adolescence, through their tweens and teens, become 18, and they go, well, you're on your own now. It's disgusting. And it's bad enough if that was a child that was taken away from a family that was actually being abusive or neglectful, because you think, okay, well, it's terrible that that happened and there's many problems with the system, but at least they weren't being abused anymore. Once you realize that a significant number of these kids weren't actually ever abused, they've condemned a child that was in a loving family to turn into an adult who has no family and has no means of finding out who their family was, or was, in some states they do that, but in other states they are allowed to find out, but their whole lives they've been told that their family was terrible, that they were abusive, that they were in the hospital constantly. And then one day that kid finds out that he or she has a medical condition, has something, has an actual chronic health condition, and doesn't have any family history to be able to go by. It doesn't have anyone to try to contact to get more help or anything like that. It's a terrible, terrible thing. So yes, if your mom, or if you on her behalf would like to reach out to us, you can go to youarethepower.net. We'd love to be a part of it. We are working to not just help these individual families that we find along the way, to be able to get their families reunited and get some semblance of justice, but we're also fighting to nip it in the bud by reintroducing the due process that makes all this nonsense goes away. Because it's not like the system would be perfect with due process. I'm not claiming the criminal justice system is perfect by any stretch, but currently what's happening is it's basically a non-elected administrative tribunal that uses roughly the same amount of due process as is involved with like a red flag warrant, or just a search warrant, to say, yeah, we're taking your kids from you and placing them for adoption forever. We've had cases where judges do not allow the medical experts to testify in the case. Like, they won't allow any medical evidence to be included in the case. The only thing they will allow is the child abuse pediatrician claiming that it's abuse with no medical evidence, just making that claim, and the caseworker saying, I read the child abuse pediatrician's report, and the arresting officer saying, I read the child abuse pediatrician's report, and the caseworker supervisor saying, I read my caseworker's report that the child abuse pediatrician reported that it was abuse, but with no evidence at all. And these judges, again, they're being paid as well, say, oh, well, yes, that must be abuse. No, I don't need to see any of this medical evidence. It is a disgusting, disgusting thing, and we are going to fight to put an end to it. So thank you for
Glad to
that.
hear it. Thanks, Spike.
Thank you. Thank you, man. Were there any other questions?
Spike, you've mostly worked in the South, I've noticed with the organization. Do you have plans to get a broader reach?
We've worked on causes as the majority of our causes are in the South and the Midwest. That's kind of a organic outgrowth of where our original activists were when we first started. But we've worked on causes as far away as Alaska and California and down in, well, I guess Florida is technically the Southeast, but none of us here in the South consider it the South. All the way in Florida. We've worked in causes across the country. We've worked in causes in New England. But yes, I mean, the short answer is, yeah, we want to be as active in all 50 states as we've been in places like Georgia and North Carolina and West Virginia and so forth. We do have members in all 50 states. And like I said, we have worked on causes across the country. This has been sort of the outgrowth of, like I said, that original group of a few dozen activists that we first reached out to. It just happened to be mostly in the Southeast and parts of the Midwest and New England. But we are growing, and I guess an even shorter answer is we'd love to have you be a part of it if you'd like to help us expand into Montana and across the country.
Actually, the other one that you might talk a little bit about is the denial of food and water to protesters. Didn't you do something on that? Was it protesters, or what was the
we had it, so in very short I guess succession to one another, we had 3 city councils in 3 different states who at roughly the same time, and originally we thought it was a coincidence and it turned out it wasn't, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. All at the same time, they were telling charities who had been operating for many years in their state that they could no longer feed homeless people. And these were charities that would feed them and try to offer them help with getting clean. Unfortunately, a lot of people that are homeless have some combination of mental health issues and substance abuse issues, and a lot of chronic pain issues as well. Usually a combination of all 3 of those things. And thank you guys again for having me, and love to have you all be a part of what we're doing at You Are the Power, and hopefully we can get involved and be more involved. Oh, thank you, Brian, for bringing that up. So we have something I mentioned, human respect, and the principle, what we call the principle of human respect, that when we respect each other as individual human beings, we are at our most prosperous and happy and harmonious. If you agree with that, we actually have a pledge on our website that you can sign to show your support for that principle. If you go to youarethepower.net/respect, you can sign that. We're trying to get as many people to sign that because we want to show that there is this growing movement of people who recognize the core issue of governance is that whoever is in a position of governance needs to respect us as individual human beings. That is how we live best, is when we are respected as individual human beings and we respect one another as individual human beings. So if you'd like to go to youarethepower.net/respect, you can be a part of that as well. So again, thank you guys so much. I'd love to hopefully come out there one day and keep fighting for liberty out there. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Spike.
Night.